and very often adding to it. Right, the first thing we want to get into is Google Sites. Now, Google Sites, once you open Google Sites, you might get to something that looks like the tab that I've gotten to, which leads you to the old Google Sites. Now, we want to go to the new Google Sites. I'll explain more on that at a later stage. But when we go into the new Google Sites, it'll bring you to a place that looks a lot more similar to when we are creating documents. Now, remember, you can create a Google site in the exact same way that we've looked at how you create a Google Doc and a Google Slide, and that is by going into Google Drive, finding the file location that you would like to use, and creating the document in there. Now, the greatest strength of Google Sites is arguably also its greatest weakness, and that is you cannot customize it to the same extent as most other site builders. There's lots of other website builders out there that adds a lot more customization to it. However, because you are limited in your customization of the site, you know with absolute certainty that anything that you're going to create will display correctly on a handheld device. And remember, most of our learners access the internet with cell phones. So we have to keep in mind the content that we want to get to them. How will it display on a handheld device? Even in our classrooms, when learners go back to school, they have access to cell phones. They have access. Sometimes they might have access to tablets. So you need to keep that in mind. And this is one of the great strengths of Google Sites, because it limits you in what you can make in the appearance of your site. It's actually a great advantage to make sure that it works on any device. Now, when you get to your site, when you create your first site, you'll get to the home page, which by default looks like this. Now, the first thing you can do before you start building on your site, if we click on themes, you'll see there are a number of themes. That is it. Those are the only themes that you can use. It's a total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 themes, and you can just change a little bit in the color of these themes. So let's say, for example, we want to use the Aristotle theme. You'll see it changes my appearance a little bit, and then I can pick what color I want to use. I can also select any color that I want. So we're going to go with red today, right? So we'll pick a red color. Actually, this color is going to be a bit distracting, right? And then we'll change our font style. You'll see they are also, again, you don't have a massive variety of font styles that you can use. So we'll just stick with our default one, modern. Now, the way in which the pages themselves are built, it is very much in blocks that you work with. You'll see here on the right, my navigation panel, I've got my 4 main elements of content that I can insert. I can insert a text box, I can insert images, I can embed something, and I can add something from Google Drive. The simplest, obviously, let's go to text box. Once you click on it, what it does is it creates a new section for you. Now, we're just going to say this is our welcome to the website. And you've got your basic formatting rules here. Remember, we can't actually change the fonts and the colors and things like that. It is very, very restrictive in that. You only have the option of selecting normal text, title, heading, subheading, and small. If you use these elements, title, heading, subheading, you can later on, there's a table of contents that you can create, which automatically adds links to different parts of your page. So if you're going to have a long page, it's a good idea to use these formatting settings. You're going to use it anyway, because if you leave everything as normal text, you can't change font size either. So we're going to select, we'll just select heading, and it gives me the welcome to the website. Now I can go on and I can type something. This is my first website. Please enjoy. Right. Okay. So once I have that, you'll see there are little, it draws a blue block around it. This is simply where we can resize and shape it. Now, once I start changing it, you'll see there are lines that form. The smaller segments are automatically there to create spaces between blocks. Remember what I said, the whole thing works blocks. So you can't be very nitpicky about how you want to size it. If I, for example, change it to the middle of that block, it'll automatically go to one of the to one of the spaces. So what I can do now is I can insert an additional text box. If I click on text box again, what it does is it adds it to a new segment here at the bottom. All that I do is I can click and I can drag it, and you'll see it automatically starts attaching it to different parts of the text. So if it's over there, it'll reshape in size along with this text. So we can just click here and we can just call this column 2 if we wanted to. We'll select it and you can play around. So the heading, the title is a bit bigger, and then we've got a heading, and then we've got our subheading, and then we've just got our normal text. It plays around with the colors, etc. You've got bold, italicize, and justifying settings. The numbers and the bullets, these normal things are all part of what you can do. Right. What's also very useful is if we look at the layouts section, which is what we're going to do now quickly. So layouts automatically creates a certain layout for you. So let's say, for argument's sake, we're going to use this layout, which creates 3 images, 3 sets of text, and then some descriptors underneath it. Now, for argument's sake, we're going to click on our page title. We'll call this English Home Language. Right, so I'm going to post all my content here in a way that is easy for learners to navigate. Remember, in Google Classroom, you can do the same thing under your classwork, but in this one, you can create something that is sometimes a bit more comfortable and familiar for learners to navigate in a website format. Right, so we're going to add some images here to make it a little bit more interesting. The first one we want to add here is we're just going to call it, so let's say when we add an image, if you click on the plus icon, you have a few options. You can upload something directly from your computer. You can select an image. We're going to look at that now. And then you might have something on Google Drive already. So let's say we're going to select an image. When you say select image, you've got a few options here: by URL, Google image search, etc. So by URL is often a very effective way. We're not going to look at how we do that now, but if you find images, on the internet that you'd like to use, you can simply right-click and say copy image address. Now, just be careful when you're using images that you are sure that you do have the right to use these images, right? Obviously, if it's a paid for, if you're going to create content that people need to pay for, you need to be very careful about the images that you're going to use. So I've already pre-selected a URL that I found somewhere. There's the symbol 8. So I'm just going to call this grade 8. And we're going to add here, please find more information for the grade 8. Right. So it's something in those lines. Now, alternatively, if we click here and we say select image, you can also use the option Google search. What happens then is we automatically search for images. So let's say we're going to look for 11 icon. And we will find, let's say we like this first one. The good thing about going through this way is you know all the images that you're using are royalty free and are automatically, you are allowed to use these things, right? So I see someone mentioned royalty free images. As I said, if you go through the Google search bar like we did it now, all of those things are royalty free. And of course, you can also use, there are certain Creative Commons licenses where you are allowed to use images as long as it's not for profit. Right, so here we've got grade 11, and we're going to say more information for grade 11. Right, just a simple explanation. Now, what we've got here is we've created 2 segments. If you look here on the side, we can move these segments around, so we could move them around in that way. So my welcome message is now under the segment, but we don't really want to do that. Again, we're working in blocks. I've created 3 blocks over here, and I've got my segment here with the 2 blocks that I use over here. Now, these segments can then also be changed. So we've got a section background. It gives you 3 options that are dependent on your theme. So my regular one is just white. Then I've got emphasis 1. This is going to be largely dependent on the color that you selected. And then you can go for emphasis 2 as well. And then you have a color like this. Remember, the themes have their default colors, which usually works better than the ones that we want to select. And you can quickly and easily change to a different theme. So let's say, for argument's sake, we don't like this one anymore. We're going to click on impression. We would prefer to use something that looks like this. Now, I've quickly changed the look of my website without having to do too much work at all. You can also, if you want to, when you select you can find an image as well, and adding these images is exactly the same way as adding these images to the rest of our site. Right, so now that we've created a basic navigation, this is all that we want to have at the start. We want to start looking at creating pages. Now, if you go to pages, you'll see at the moment I've only got the one page, the home page. We've got our two links over here, so we want to create pages for these. If we click on this plus icon, you've got the option of either just inserting a link or you can add a page. If we add a page, we're going to call this first page grade. We'll call it grade 8. Right, and then we're going to add this one. So now we've got grade 8. We don't necessarily want grade 8 to form its own little, I suppose it can form its own little thing over there. And then we're going to add another one that we call grade 11. Now, please note, what's happening here, automatically it's being added to my navigation at the top. You can also, this navigation, if you click on the gear icon, you find this gear icon here at the side. If you click on the gear icon, you can also change your navigation mode to side if you prefer it to appear as an icon like this on the side of your navigation. It really depends on how many links you're going to have. I usually like to use top. Right. The other thing that we didn't do, if we go back to our home page, when we look at our headers, we've got different types of headers. We can use a title only, and then there is no image included here, or we can use a banner. We can use a large banner, or if you really want, you can use a cover, which means that they will open it and they will see a giant picture with English Home Language on it. And you can use it any way that you want. So once we have that, we can also add an image. So let's say we're going to find an image that works for us. There is a default gallery that you can select images from. You can enter a URL. If we're just going to search for English literature, we'll find something interesting. Let's use this one. Right, now what's quite nice as well is there's this adjusting for readability function that is added when we add this thing. So the readability means it actually changes the image to a slightly darker or slightly lighter depending on the fonts that you're using and the color that you're using, so that it actually fits a little bit better. So that looks quite nice. We've got we've added it to our top banner. Now remember, if we're going to go to, if we did this first, then the grade 8 and grade 11 ones would have automatically received that banner. But because we didn't add it, now we have the option of changing these ones as well, adding certain things for them as well. If you look at our top navigation, if you want to, you can also, by clicking and dragging something to home, it's going to now, it appears as a drop down over there. And I can add grade 8. And now suddenly I've got a drop down where I select the pages that I want to go to. Within the editor, you can easily navigate using the navigation of within your page as well, if you want to jump between your pages while you're editing, or you can just quickly use the sidebar and create and to go to different things. Right. So if we are in grade 11, now we want to go and we want to again create different sections for ourselves. So let's say, for argument's sake, we want to create 4 sections. We'll create one called literature, and we'll create one that we call poetry. We'll create one that we call writing, and another one we call grammar. And in this way, we can add little bits of content to all of them and create our navigation the way that we want to. So if we add literature, I've just found a few images before and that we can use. Oh, actually, I've used this one. My poetry. As an example. So we can call this one now Things Fall Apart. Right. So now we have a very basic grade 11 page, and our navigation is here at the top. But we've already created these elements in the in my homepage, and none of this is linking to anything yet. So now the next important thing is we need to start setting up links to different things. Yes, there's automatically this navigation at the top, but as they're going to scroll, they might want to be able to link to it in a different way. Any item that you select, you can immediately insert a link, and then it gives you the option of the pages that you have already created. Right, so we're going to say grade 11. We want our image to link to it, but we want our text to link to it as well. Right, so now both of these things have become links. So once a learner opens it on his cell phone, if he just taps on 11, he will go to my grade 11 page. Okay, so now we are getting there. We've got our grade 11 page set up. We have a little bit of content as well. One thing I want to show you as well, if we, for argument's sake, want to change an image, let's say we're going to change our image to this one of poetry. Now, suddenly, the way that the Google site works, again, it works in blocks. So this block, because it is next to this block, these things need to be the exact same size for your site to display correctly. So what it will do is it will automatically crop my image. If I say uncrop, it's going to shrink it down to a size that looks a very small size over there, which I can also do. So the uncrop button is the one that looks like a little block that has not been completed. What I can also do, if I want to use this image, but I just want to change it around a little bit, if I click the crop button, it'll show me the entire image, and now I can move it around, and I can find that works quite nicely for me, right? So there I've got an image for poetry. So if I want to create some further links, now I'm going to continue with my adding elements to my navigation. So let's say we create a things fall apart page, right? We do not want our things fall apart page just to fall over there under the home. We want to make sure that things fall apart is categorized under grade 11. So if I just want to move these things out again, if I click on grade 11 and move it over there, it'll move the entire folder with all the sub pages to it, right? It'll move to this part. So now I've got things fall apart. Up until this point, I've only been creating navigation. I haven't actually added any content yet. So when we want to start adding content, remember our basic functions that we have is adding a text box, adding images, and then embedding becomes a bit more complicated. I'm not going to go into too much detail there. And then adding from Google Drive. Now, one thing that is very important to take note of when you are going to add files from Google Drive, you need to make sure that your sharing rights and access is set to a certain way that allows people to view it. Remember, we're going to create a site that is now essentially trying to avoid the pitfall that learners have of not being able to sign into their accounts, forgetting their passwords, etc. They can go onto the site. They don't have to log in. They don't have to do any of those things. They just simply need the website address. This is what we are trying to build here. So when you're going to add something from Drive, right? So let's say we're going to go to Google Drive. We want to go to, I'm going to add this shared with me, or let's go to, right. So in my Drive, things fall apart. Now I've got this folder that has certain things in it. Things fall apart. Now I want to share certain elements to it. One of the nice things about this is I can actually select multiple things. So let's say for argument's sake, we're going to select, we want to select a, there's a sample essay, there's another document, we're going to select these 5 things that we want to insert, right? And now it goes and it fetches the documents for me. All of these things have automatically been inserted. Again, be careful, because if you do not give them the access, the viewing rights to access these things, they will not be able to view it. So one thing that I really recommend, a good idea when you are going to build a site like this. Again, Google Site really enjoys working alongside Google Drive. So what I would recommend when you start building your site like this is that you go into Google Drive and make sure that the folder, that you've got a folder that's going to have your content in it, and that it has link sharing enabled. If you're not sure how that works, we created a video very early on where we spoke about how exactly we share content on Google Drive. But just to show you very quickly, I'm just going to go to the folder where I've got this content in, right? So if you look at this folder, I've got this grade 11 one. If I right click on it, there's a get shareable link. Just make sure that the sharing settings that you've enabled allows people to view your content, right? So if I'm going to say share, I might not be able to do this because I'm not the actual owner of this file. If we go to the people that can access it, there you see there's an option, anyone with the link. So if I say this and I save and I allow this, anyone with a link can view. What it means is anyone who accesses my website will be able to view any of the files in that folder. It makes your life a lot easier than having to go and change these settings one by one for each file. What is quite nice is if we go to this insert area at the bottom and we insert something like a Google slide. Let's say we're going to insert a Google slide of, when I'm busy with the things fall apart. So let's go to the search. Right, so here's things fall apart. There's a Google slide. Now, what's nice about when we insert a Google slide, you'll see when we start viewing it, there's automatic navigation that is involved. Right, the great thing so far is all of this content can be accessed without the learners having to struggle with a Google account, having to try and connect to what is happening here. So I have very quickly built an entire set of resources for my learners. Obviously, this is not well ordered now. If I want to, I can go change it a little, make it a bit more interesting when viewing it by adding different emphasis colors, etc. Just to add to the viewing quality of it. I will add different. I can add new headers, etc., to the whole thing, and you can play around with lots of different little elements that to add into it. If, for example, we see. Hallo?
Jaco, ekskuus. Hallo Jaco, ekskuus. Ons kan nie jou skerm sien op die oomblik nie, hoor?
Sorry, I was sharing the wrong tab. So I've added all of these elements. The last thing that I spoke about was when we're adding a Google slide. If you look over here, I'm going to preview this thing in a minute, and then you'll see how we can navigate through the Google slide while still being inside the website. Now, generally, that doesn't work so well on a mobile device because it's already quite small, but they can still navigate it. They just won't be able to navigate it while remaining inside of the page. So you can play around with a lot of these different elements in here. Whenever you're inserting something from Google Drive, remember, it gives you the option of where you want to go navigate for it. So you can click on My Drive and navigate normally, but you can also just go to the search option, search in Drive. And what is very useful is adding these filters to it. In other words, saying what kind of file we want to search for, when was it modified, and who's the owner of the file, inserting these different files. Now, when we want to preview our page, before we're going to publish it, there's a little icon over here that you can see. There's a small screen, another small screen. If you click on that, then what happens is it's going to open up my page, and this is what it will appear like on a laptop, right? So it starts opening up the different documents. I think my laptop is hating me a little bit now. It's been working very hard. And you'll see what's nice is the documents are embedded within they've been embedded inside the page. So here I've got Eurocentrism and things fall apart. I can scroll and I can read that document. I can scroll down. I can read the next document. All of that, those questions. And there's some more questions on things fall apart, etc., etc. And here I've got my Google slide, which I can also navigate inside of the page as I've created it. So in short, what it does is it really creates a very quick and easy way. If you've got your content already loaded onto something like Google Drive and sorted in a way, then it's a very quick way to embed your information, all your documents onto a site that learners do not have to log into, that they can simply access the page and find all the content that they want to find. But there's a lot more to it that you can play around with. Just to show you here, what's quite nice is we can now view what it will look like on a tablet. So this is what they will see when they access a tablet and a cell phone as well. This is what it looks like when they access a cell phone. Now, obviously, they can't read these things because it is just simply too small. So what happens if they click on this on a cell phone, it'll break out to the document itself. Just give it a second, and then the document will load, which they can then obviously zoom in and then read as far as they need to, right? So they know how to zoom in. Obviously, I can't do that trick on my computer. So it's a very nice way of seeing what your content will display like on a cell phone as well, which is a very important thing for us to keep in mind. There's the navigation. It's a very straightforward and easy way to navigate. Getting to grade 8, things fall apart, etc., etc. Right, now the last quick trick that I want to show you, which is a very useful thing to be able to do. It's a bit more complicated. Let's just go to the grade 8 page. And that is, how do we insert a Google Drive folder? Now, if I'm going to insert a folder, I'm going to use the embed option. You can play around with the embed option a little bit more as you start seeing how the system works, and you'll figure out all sorts of nice things that you can do. When we want to embed a folder, we need to go back to Google Drive and right-click on the folder and get the shareable link of this folder, right? If we get the shareable link of the folder, I see there's a question, I'll answer it in a second. We're going to just allow the link sharing, activate the link sharing, and again, make sure that your settings are set in a way that enables learners to view all the content. Once I've done that, and I go, now I'm back to my website. If I just insert this link, what's going to happen is it will find that folder. Let's just move it to the middle, and it'll show me all the content that I have in that folder. So this is a very quick way of, if you've got Google Drive and you want to share multiple things, you just put a lot of files in that, and as files are loaded into the folder, it will continue to display on your website. Right? Let me just quickly have a look at the question. Right, if you want to download documents, yes, they can download a document. If they open it, they will just have to download it the way they would normally download from Drive. There's a button in the top right corner that you click download document. You can also, if you want to, but this is a bit more complicated. If you want to know how, you can just send me an email about it. But you can set your documents that they can't be downloaded by anyone as well. It's a setting in Google Drive. So if you don't want your documents to be downloaded, you can set it this way. But generally, they will click and they will open, and then in the top right, there's a download option always. Right, so that is Google Sites in a nutshell. Obviously, what we need to talk about is how do we get this to our learners. So when we are done with our website, when we are happy with it, you need to click on the publish icon before anything changes. Right, every time you make a change, and this is something that's a little bit different than most Google things, it will save the changes that you've made, but it won't make them active and won't make it live. So here, when we say publish your site, we're going to just call this our demo site. Make sure here's also a setting over here. Who can view my site? If you are using a G Suite domain access, then you can restrict it to only learners from your school, but then they naturally have to be able to log in. So then they'll have to use an address that is linked to your school. So we can click on manage, and we don't want to make it only this. We actually want to say the published one can be found. Anyone can find the published version, save. So in this way, it becomes accessible to everyone. So now we're going to publish it. It'll take a while to publish because it's the first time, so it needs to create things. I actually published very quickly. And now if we want to share it with people, there's an icon over there. That's the link one. Click on that, and it'll give me my published, actually, we'll just go to the home page and then click on the icon, and it'll give me the address to get to that site. So there's the address that has been created, sites.google.com/WCED, and there's the address. Now, obviously, if you want to, you can take that and you can shorten it by using something like Bitly, or you can create a QR code, however you want your learners to access it. But it's a very quick way of how you get your content to your learners. Lots of content to be able to share this with your learners quite easily. Right. So I think that's it that we want to talk about when it comes to Google Sites. I hope there are no more questions, because otherwise we're going to run out of time. I know Google Sites can do a lot more than this. You'll have to, the best way to understand Google Sites is to start fiddling around with it and realize how it works. But Google Sites integrates incredibly well with Google Drive, like all Google products. It's very useful to make sure that your content is already accessible on Google Drive, and then it is very, very quick to just drag things in. Right, so a question, why would we want to use Google Sites rather than Google Classroom? The one thing about Google Sites, well, there are two reasons why Google Sites is a useful tool to share your content. One of the things is learners sometimes struggle with Google Classroom to access content, and secondly, they are a lot more comfortable and familiar with something that looks like a website. At the end of the day, sharing things on Google Classroom does make a lot of sense, especially if you do have a G Suite domain. So picking between the two, they have got different uses, I suppose, is the key thing when it comes to that. So it's easy to, I think sometimes it's easier to have a single site that is used for example, the entire grade 8 group. So let's say we've got a site like this, English Home Language, that we will create. I will make sure that all English home language teachers have editing rights here when we share and collaborate, and we will put our content into this while the teachers have their individual classrooms where they can have individual contact with their learners.